Offered for the approval of the Midnight Society, it's Voyager Please, a hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
And I'm a cheeky replicator that just puts your food on the ground, Peter.
Before we discuss this week's episode, Peter, I need to give a shout out to one of our loyal Voyager Please listeners, Michael. We know him as Tall. He is a delightful man, and he's been a friend of both of ours for many years. He recently decided to finish watching Star Trek Picard. Now, here on Voyager Please, we absolutely do not advocate for self-harm in any way, shape, or form, so we would never suggest anyone watch Star Trek Picard. However, watching someone watch Star Trek Picard for the first time can be its own form of entertainment.
I would say it was far more entertaining watching him go through the throes than it was watching Picard itself.
His reaction to the finale captured so much of my own emotions. I truly knew what he was feeling. You know, like I was in such a similar wavelength as him. I knew what he was going through.
We stopped doing our reviews, episode 5 of Picard? Maybe 4?
5 or 6, yeah.
We really get that deep in.
Yeah, we got halfway through. We made the decision to stop and then did one more because we had already watched it. If you recall, that's kind of why it feels like we went.
He asked if we ever finished it off and did a recap, and I dug through the archives. That was at the end of Voyager Please Season 4. We used part of that Rest in Peace, the RIP, to do our final thoughts on Picard. That started about the hour mark. So if there's ever anybody out there that wants to see our true final thoughts, check out that Season 4 RIP. Go an hour in and we'll pick up on the Picard conversation. But again, I'm glad we did that. It's nice to be able to go through and remember my thoughts that I have forgotten so many times about that property.
Yeah, it's the funny part of doing a show like this. I know that you and I, we talk about this, and for someone who listens to it for the first time, it's very current for them. But it was years ago that we watched like season 3, right? Like it from our present relative position in time. That was several years ago. I don't remember everything I said about season 3.
No.
In fact, I don't think I remember a quarter of the things I said about season 3 specifically. I remember my sentiments about it. I remember the overall mood I had, we had about it, that being positive. But sometimes it is very useful to go back and listen to what we said about things. And I think we'll end up doing more of that as we start to form our thoughts about the season or the series as a whole. Because we're getting actually not only to the end of season 6, but necessarily the end of the show itself. But before we get to that end, we have this week's episode. Peter, what was it?
We're moving into season 6, episode 25, The Haunting of Deck 12.
I said last week that this one gets bagged on a lot, and I have not watched it in practically forever because it just has this reputation of being bad. That reputation is completely false. I thought this was great.
I wouldn't go with great. It was certainly okay to maybe go. For Season Sucks, and granted, Season Sucks, aka Season 6, has hit some very high points for me personally. I really loved last week's entry, which was Lifeline, Maximum Picardo. Which one was Fury?
Oh, the Voyager grows up blonde's rotten.
Yeah, that's a mixed bag. Muse was all right. Live Fast and Prosper was awesome. Good Shepherd. They've certainly turned things around for what was a deplorable season, and in the light of a deplorable season, yeah, I thought Haunting at Deck 12 was interesting. It was nice to have Neelix front and center. And I was thinking in the shower about that dirty space rat, like you do when you're naked, right?
Mm-hmm.
His fused toes, his rubber hobbit feet.
It's fucking cursed images that we will never be without. I mean, they even zoomed into them. They made it so you couldn't forget
They're
them.
Man, these prosthetics are fucking terrible. Hey, zoom in on these. Let's really rub Tony's face in the shit over in the prop department. The many faces of Neelix, right? You've got Papa Neelix which we get in this one, and that's the Neelix that is the kind, soft, stepfatherly figure that takes care of Naomi Wildman and now the Borg children. You got our favorite, which is New Jack Neelix, and that's the drug dealing space merchant Neelix. You've got
cowardly cat person Neelix, cowardly lion Neelix, who cannot handle stress whatsoever. He needs a quiet room at all times.
You've got murder troll Neelix, which is one of my personal favorites, and that's Neelix that always has the troll face, kind of looking at the camera in the eye, but like, who am I gonna kill now? How am I gonna get the ship or away team in a really dangerous situation with my hijinks?
Just to remind everyone, Neelix not only killed someone, he killed someone and then dropped a CSI Miami level one-liner after killing them.
You're talking about Jonas, not Hogan, right? Because Neelix has killed a couple people at this point.
I mean,
how many people has Neelix killed?
Hogan was killed through negligence. Jonas was killed on purpose.
Was it again? That's what I'm saying. Troll Neelix. I don't think Hogan was negligence. I think he got him killed. That was pretty.
You think that there was maybe some beef? There was some beef in the background we didn't see. He was trying to move in on Cass, after Tom gave up, and he's like, I'm not going through this a second time.
You're not bridge crew.
You're getting eaten by the rock monster.
You're not bridge crew. I can off you and get away with it. You certainly tainted my perception of this going in, so maybe I wasn't looking at it through neutral eyes. I was already predisposed thinking it was going to be a stupid episode. It came out a little bit better than I was expecting, and that's fine.
I do like the overall conceit of the episode, which is it is Neelix telling a story. Like, the entire episode occurs in the relative past of Voyager. We get an opening of Neelix in the mess hall turning things off because they're about to turn out all the power. And they're talking about something that happened prior to that event, because 7 of 9 comes in and spooks them, and there's this sort of horror movie element, spooky story element to all of this, including the music. There's in fact one spot where the music gets almost very like Friday the 13th, with some synths and a little almost like type of vibe to it. I guess that's Friday the 13th, isn't it?
Yeah. This premiered. Oh, wow, look at that. May 17th. Here we are on May 27th. 21 years later. I would have not been surprised if this was their October entry for some sort of play at Halloween stuff.
It does have that vibe to it. So they do a decent job of establishing a disquieting atmosphere, and they frame it up as a ghost story that whatever Voyager is up to, it has to do with some nebula. It looks spoopy, and all the power has to be turned off, and it has to do with some shit that happened apparently before the Borg children were even on board. So several episodes have gone on in the show between whenever this stuff originally happened and now, which is an interesting conceit because we know there isn't necessarily stakes to this episode, right? Like, we know everyone has been on the show since then. Neelix has to go babysit the kids because they are all going to be taken out of their regeneration cycles. And so he's telling them a story that he gets led to because one of the Borg children, I think it was Mizati,
the little girl.
The little girl brings up that Naomi Wildman said that Deck 12 was haunted. But then Icheb actually brings up, well, there is a part of Deck 12 that no one is allowed to access, which is very strange. And that's when they launch into the story, and it's told all in flashbacks from Neelix's recollection, which is pointed out in the story to be flawed. Not exactly correct. He's a somewhat unreliable narrator.
Maybe it's a failure of the episode, but by the end, you don't really ever get confirmation if Neelix is telling the truth or not.
It does seem like he was telling the truth. It's just some of the details were probably not exactly accurate.
True, but at the same time, we do know that Neelix is known to be full of shit, and there was kind of a twinkle in his eye at the end, kind of like, oh yeah, I've just been wasting everybody's fucking time getting you to direct your attention off something else. You never really see anything fly out of the ship, and they never really confirm this stuff. It doesn't matter ultimately one way or the other.
They do, though. They have the shot there at the end where he goes up to the bridge and they cut to the electric entity that's now in the nebula.
Did they? Because I didn't see.
Yeah. I mean, they don't tell you that everything Neelix said is true, but they
do
clearly indicate that something along the lines of what Neelix described happened.
Okay. To be fair, I fell asleep like halfway through this. So I was very sleepy by the end of this, and I might have missed that. This episode, I'm curious what they were really going for. So this is a story by Mike Sussman, teleplay by Kenneth Bewilder, Brian Fuller, directed by old David Livingston. Like, were they trying to make something kind of scary, or is this supposed to be more of a silly? How did it come off to you?
I think that there was some genuine attempts at making a scary episode. And there were a couple scenes that really worked to that end. And I think where this episode does not fully work is that they don't kind of like follow that thread very effectively. Because they'll have some effective sort of horror, jump scare, disquiet, especially at the end with Janeway basically like negotiating with the entity, and it's literally killing her, and she's not allowing it to have its way, and that's very well done. And then you have the scene where Harry Kim runs into the wizard from the D&D movie and talk about all the times they've been invaded by terrible aliens, which is comedic. Funny. It was a funny scene and doesn't necessarily connect with the rest of the mood.
The episode that this reminds me of the most is Night, which was season 4 opener?
That was the season 5 opener.
That's where we get introduced to the Malon and the Tootsie Roll people. And the front half of that episode, they're going through a region of space that's like pitch black. And then at a certain point, Voyager loses power. And I think that episode does a much better job of making Voyager seem creepy with the lights off, makes it feel very stale and almost like a crypt. Better jump scares than that other stuff. So comparing the two of those together, I think that Night really beat it out if you're going for a horror atmosphere. I've got some ideas on how to spruce it up, but moving through, like, yeah, you've got two stories. You've got Neelix's recollection of the past, and then Neelix in the present dealing with a bunch of little kids, as you've wonderfully put it, sitting around a fire playing Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes. This actually kind of feels right in the sort of level of Are You Afraid of the Dark in terms of level of fright. It's not actually scary. It tries to set a mood. It is more effective at some times than others in accomplishing that. I kind of gave this extra points for effort, and also because it was so much better than my expectations and memory, that I think I started, particularly towards the end, feeling very charitable about it.
Pity points. Great.
I did. I gave it pity points because it's like, man, this got the at least you tried cake. Like this tried to do something cool and interesting and tell a story in a different way, and still felt very Star Trek and very much like a Voyager episode.
When 7 of 9 shows up in the mess hall to kind of start babysitting Neelix, they begin turning things off. I find it ridiculous, the notion that 7 of 9 does not have night vision. And even with like half of her brain and that occipital implant being in there, that she still has to use those ridiculous goddamn wristband flashlights.
As soon as I saw them get turned on, I knew you'd mention it.
It looks so dumb. So dumb. Like, just when Neelix is poking around the mess hall and he's got like his arm crooked like a T-Rex to try and point this fucking flashlight. Ridiculous. They set it up and they're like, all right, begin the power down process, and you get a pretty cool montage of all the different parts of the ship as the lights turn off. And all I could think is like, man, how annoying would it be if every time the lights turned off in a room, it actually made the noise they used to power everything down in this episode? Because it's that just over and over and over again.
The flashbacks start in this episode to set up why everything has happened is that Voyager is topping off the tank. So something they I think better explain in this episode than in most other times. Deuterium is the fuel that is the matter in the matter antimatter reaction, right? The dilithium crystals are important because they catalyze the matter antimatter reaction. They are not the fuel of a warp drive. And right now, Voyager is trying to collect deuterium from a Class J nebula that apparently has a great deal of it in it, using the Bussard collectors, which are the edges, I guess, like on the periphery of the warp nacelles, if I recall correctly.
No, it's the red things at the end.
It's the red things at the end. Okay, yeah. I knew they were on the nacelles.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is you just kind of like motor through a bunch of it, and you start vacuuming it up, and that's how you can kind of top off the tank. So they're going through a refueling period. I thought that was very cool continuity. Really like dug deep on like technical details and kind of got it all right. And it's kind of an unsteady ride. The ship's getting rocked quite a bit. Neelix is panicky. He's not a big fan of space turbulence, evidently. A lot of bad memories from Talax and shit where, freighters would go missing. Like his old story about them, like all asphyxiating slowly one by one. And brings his concerns up to Tuvok. They have more awkward buddy comedy moments in this one. Where he's like, why don't you ask for permission to get some fucking curtains in your quarters if you're not worried about it. But before long, things are not going super hot and they need to motor out of there because they're destabilizing the nebula. When they do, they get a stowaway who is ultimately the ghost in our ghost story.
That begins the onset of some pretty by the numbers things are wrong around the ship, which I enjoy. When the sonic showers are fucking up and the replicators are a pretty cool scene, especially for the year 2000.
The 2000
Janeway makes one cup of coffee. It tastes like poop. She makes another cup of coffee. It replicates the coffee, but not the cup. So you've got this cylinder of black fluid that then falls apart all over the replicator deck, and then a cup beams in separately. And Janeway begins this pattern we'll see 2 or 3 times through the episode where she gets in close and talks to the ship directly. At that point, she says, this is a bad way to start the morning. And Chakotay's there, and he kind of catches her, and he's like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm just talking to the ship. And then Chakotay's got this line where he's like, oh, I used to talk to my Maquis ship all the time, and it's like, come on, man. It's your ship.
Valjean. Name your ship, dude. It's called the Valjean.
Your dirty El Camino ghetto sled.
Listen, rednecks talk to their shitty cars all the time. I mean,
everybody talks their cars. I had my Civic had a name, Grace. She was awesome. I love these, but yeah, like, damn it, Chakotay used the name. Yeah, my Maquis ship, Valjean. You might remember it. We had to use it to ram the fucking the Kmart Klingons. Back when you stranded us all, Kathy.
Back before we realized that all we had to do was fart at them and they would run away.
Yeah.
Like, there's no fight in those Kmart Klingons. Ruined a perfectly good ship.
Yeah. I'm frequently drawn back to like that. Wasn't Prometheus. Was it Prometheus? What was the season opener for this one?
Oh, that would have been the
Equinox. The idea of there being two ships lost in space, the Pegasus and the Battlestar Galactica. It might have been interesting to see the Valjean ride it out a
I
little deeper.
I know that it wouldn't, because quite frankly, a lot of the dramatic tension in Battlestar Galactica got sucked out for the period of time in which the Pegasus was sort of in play, because so much of what was making the show compelling, and I guess we'll get to talk about this more in a not too distant future, is that the scarcity of resources was extremely real, and that Galactica as the sort of military presence was obviously like literally a ship about to be retired, right? Like it is the bottom of the barrel in terms of ships that are capable of doing this. And then Pegasus shows up, and after all the initial drama there, you just all of a sudden had the state of the art super ship that could literally produce new Vipers in it, that just kind of crushed that element of the show for like a 2/3 of a season, you
Well,
know?
in this case, Voyager would have been the Pegasus since it's the new top of the line, and Chakotay's El Camino would have been the resource sieve. But these systems are fucking up all over the ship, and you get the classic disaster stuff, right? Chakotay almost gets killed in a turbo lift.
I thought that was so cool, and I figured you would be all about it.
I
Finally,
loved
someone
it.
almost dies in a turbo lift.
And I would think that Chakotay would have been like, all right, attention all hands, stay off the turbo lifts. I almost
Yeah,
just
he just
got killed.
comes out like, oh, that sucked. Like he's barely moved at the fact that the turbo lift tried to kill him.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go check these neural gel packs. Well, only if we don't go on the turbo lifts. Well, why can't we go on the turbo lifts? Oh, it's a funny story. I'll tell you in the Jeffries tube. No, tell the chief engineer now before you've got some fucking Resident Evil shit and someone gets their head ripped off.
Janeway knows something's wrong because they're going around in circles. And, like, Tom, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, oh, my instruments say we're not going around in circles. And he's like about to go on this, we spend too much time relying on 24th century technology. Give me a star map and dead reckoning and I'll set us straight. And then they just like jump to warp. Like,
Yep.
it's not good. There could be a star that way.
Could
Stop.
be space dust and maybe the main deflector is offline and we're going to get obliterated. When your starship quits listening to commands, it can be very scary. And this, I think that back in Next Gen, I can't remember the episode name, but the one where the Yamato blows up.
Yeah, it was early on.
I thought that was a really awesome episode. I thought that the horror and the danger and the frantic sword of Damocles hanging over their head was like so real in that. And seeing like what happens when a Federation starship falls apart from the inside out. I don't think they really captured that properly here, and I think that was too bad because there is a lot of mileage to get out of those moments, and they kind of speed through it here.
Part of the sequence is B'Elanna thinks she has it figured out. She thinks it's bioneural gel packs. They go check it out. Gel packs are fine. 7 of 9 thinks that suddenly returning guest star Tal Saris is somehow responsible for this. Yes, the Bajoran lady from the Good Shepherd episode. Just back in this one. Like, haven't seen her since. We'll never see her again. But all of a sudden she's here. And it was a welcome return.
I will never say no to 90s hotties.
By the way, I want to apologize to our listeners because I probably made the biggest punt of my podcasting career when I failed to mention that Tal Saris was played by the same actress who played the wizard lady in the D&D movie. So if you were, as I was in the year 2000, a lad who played his share of Dungeons and Dragons, you too would have been hype over the concept of a Dungeons and Dragons movie when you heard of it literally in the pages of InQuest magazine.
I was working in the movie theater when that came out. It was fucking terrible.
Oh God, yes. So here I read about it in this in InQuest magazine. I'm like, holy shit, a D&D movie that's going to be in theaters. This is crazy. And then you read that there's a Wayne's brother involved in some way, and you're like, I don't know, seems a little suspect, but okay. Jeremy Irons is the villain. Okay, that's cool. Thora Birch, who I guess was most famous for what, Ghost World at that point. I don't know if Ghost World came out before that or after that. No, it was American Beauty came out before that because I was in 1999, and I think Ghost World might have come in after. So, two famous actors, a Wayne's brother. There's like things happening here, right? And this was the first time in my life that I went and saw a movie, saw it in theaters, saw it opening weekend, watched it. It was terrible, and I really like actually for the first time was like, bad movies can also be fun to watch because they're bad. You know, like that moment where it's like, oh, bad movies aren't miserable. Bad movies can be so bad that you can make fun of them with your friends. And they're actually an enjoyable thing to watch. So we watch it. And as we're watching, we're astonished by how bad it is. And about halfway through, we're finally like into how bad it is after we've gotten over that initial shock of like, this is fucking terrible. And we went and ended up watching it 2 more times. Like, we had to bring more, like, you have to see this. It's not gonna last. You have to see this artifact in its final form.
Well, your miss on her being the wizard, I would say, still pales in comparison to me somehow missing that Seven of Nine's father is Ugg from Salute Your Shorts. The shame I feel there is eternal. But anyways, there's the wizard, and there is the daughter of Ugg. And 7 of Nine's like, hey, you fucked this up so bad that I'm here to fix it now. And she's like, but I just got here. And it's, you know, it's neat to see this character not only pulled out of mothballs, but right in the rut of what her concern was, that she's got the universe's hardest boss and her job sucks ass.
Yeah, like, it is actually perfectly in continuity with where we picked up with her before. Is she feels like a charity case, and she has a perfectionist robot, you know, lady as her superior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Terminatrix is overseeing her and has zero chill with her fucking up. So much so that something fucks up in her vicinity. She's done nothing, and 7 of 9 charges over and is like, "You fucked this up. How dare you?" And she's like, I just got here. I didn't touch anything," and then it fucks up again. It's like, see, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. It's not my fault this time.
So what's going on is the spaced ghost is jumping from system to system, and while it's present, it's thrown out all sorts of error codes, but by the time repair crews show up, we find out that, hey, everything's fine after all, and it becomes this process of trying to chase the problem down and get to it before it has a chance to move on. I want to say this culminates with 7 of 9 in a cargo bay, maybe even her board regeneration alcove.
Yeah, it's pointed out it is in fact the same cargo bay that the kids are in that moment. It's reflected on by the children. It's part of the spooky.
She sees, and the ghost is represented by like crackling electricity. We see the thing go into the alcove and start crackling. I figured 7 would just grab one of the many compression rifles she has stowed away in there and blast it, but
that's why she collects them there.
That's why she had Joe Carey cleaning them there. It starts fucking with environmental controls, basically rebuilding the nebula it was picked up in, which is a poison gas, and 7 goes to get out of it, and it locks the door down, and we find out that the emergency override's hidden in the floor next to the door. Okay, whatever.
Gotta be somewhere, sure. If I'm about to pass out, I guess that's a convenient place for it.
She gets out, but it puts up force fields. For the first time ever, force fields managed to stop 7 of 9. For all the time she's rampaged unchecked through the ship. What I'm saying is, space gas is a better security operator than Tuvok is.
Just add it to the list.
Space gas, swamp gas is able to contain 7 of 9 where Tuvok cannot. We got Chakotay and B'Elanna, and they show up and like, oh god, there she is. She's laying on the ground. She's getting covered in nebula gas. It's shocking her through her implant. We can't get the computer to override. We find out that you can deactivate a force field, a security force field, by shooting the wall. Chakotay, for some reason, has a Type 2 phaser. Sure, whatever. And yeah, he blasts the thing and the door goes down. Yay. Problem solved for now.
So they get Seven to sick bay, and they're continuing to try and figure out what's going on. There is a moment where everything starts to go wrong in the mess hall, and Harry Kim is in there, and apparently he is in a position of high enough authority that he basically tells everyone to go back to work.
I've got that in my notes. I say Kim flexing nuts.
And he's a bridge officer, yeah.
What so much just said, shut up, sit down.
Yeah, some lieutenant in the back is like, Ensign, I'm eating my spaghetti. Shut the fuck up.
Just some Dolby back there having his Leo root beef jerky. Shut up. So we get a fair amount of disorganization that'll drive the next couple scenes where the halls get vacated, and for a ship as small as it is, with as many people as it has, it becomes a ghost town of sorts. And that's going to require the bridge getting evacuated in what I consider to be one of the most delightful scenes I have seen all series.
And it was quite a industrial accident type of effect that I know is near and dear to your heart.
Not only an industrial accident, but very lulzy. They're trying to get Khan back online so they can get control of the ship, and nothing seems to be working. And then Janeway gets in for some more ship talking. Hey, if you do what I want you to do, I'm going to find the next M-class planet we can. We're going to bust out that 37 stock footage and land this bitch again. Maybe even we'll get Dragon's Teeth landing footage because that was so much better. And I'm going to do a full maintenance work out of you, and it's going to be so great. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. And then Tom's like, oh, great, the Khan's back on. I don't know what you did, but I'm going to go ahead and lay in the... As Mortal Kombat, Raiden comes out of the helm and shocks him right in the fucking face, right in the teeth. And it's not just like a quick flash. It's like Ghostbusters proton pack. They're laying into him like he's a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I think he even gets like a momentary shouted warning from Janeway of like, Tom, your console is about to
proton pack you.
And he's like, what? And then and the best part though is that when he's like slumped over, and when they like bring him back up into frame to take him to sickbay, he's got some gnarly burn makeup all over him. Like he's fucked up.
He looks.
It's like Cass tried to melt his brain level of fucked up.
It's like he laid on the two wires on the streetcar and got all the electricity through his face. Like normally they skimp on these things, and someone's just saying like, "Oh gosh, yeah, no." Like
little brown makeup here or there. You look a little burned, quote unquote.
He's like one step back from when his face was pulsing in Threshold when he was turning into Lizard Tom.
yeah, it's a serious wound, and they really went the distance on the makeup for this shot and this shot alone. It was pretty crazy.
They're like trying to bring him up to the doctors, to the sick bay, and like people are real close up on him. Like, God, this face probably stinks. Like that wound looks
burnt
stinky.
Flesh.
Immediately, we are confronted with a situation that I don't know if we've ever mentioned on the show or not before, but the doctor's only backup being Tom Paris is a real stupid idea. So when you're dragging Nurse Tom Paris to the doctor because his face just got burned off, and then the doctor gets turned off by the power fluctuations, like, maybe we should have planned on not having...
Maybe we should have taken someone to medical school, like we've been saying.
Tom Paris, the helmsman. The helm on Voyager is like this horseshoe. It's potentially the biggest LCARS console in the entire ship. And as you know, the LCARS consoles in Federation ships are laden with C4 and electricity beams.
Pipe bombs are under all of them.
If anybody stands a chance of getting their face blown off on a regular basis, it's Tom. Tom should not be your only medical backup. Tom is the most at-risk person, short of whoever is currently subordinate to Neelix.
They have the doctor. They put him in I think in the mobile emitter or something like that, so that he doesn't get vanished as all of this stuff happens. And there's other people who've hurt. Obviously, 7 of 9 was there. Fucked up shit is happening. And this is where they have the random scene where Harry Kim is wandering the halls and then just gets ambushed by Tal Celis in the middle of the hall, just rolls up with a steel chair and just hits him in the stomach and is prepared to go house on him, and then realizes it's Harry. And we get the scene, which is actually great. It's extremely well acted. I really wish we could have seen more of Tal Celis, because she's so into, like, I thought you could be Borg or Hirogen, because we get invaded by aliens all the time. This is how they do it, right? They weaken us with some bullshit and then they come to get us. I'm ready. I'll fuck them up with a chair. Let's do this shit.
I'm Bait Joran. We don't play.
Yeah, I'll fuck them up. Let's do it. I ain't getting taken over. Like, I mean, it's a little bit more panicky than that, but she's also like, I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
And then Harry's like, no, everything's fine, even though I haven't seen anybody else for an hour somehow. Like, this isn't a Galaxy class ship. You're not walking around like a stadium. It's a small ship. I thought it was silly that he didn't know to go down to engineering or whatever, but I thought it would have been cool if they'd be like, hey, you're the only person I've seen in like hours. Are we caught in like a static warp bubble, or did we get pulled off into like some weird, wacky alternate reality where we're here alone? Again, a starship in the dark, as we saw in Night, should be very creepy, and I wish David Livingston could have captured that essence a little better than what we saw.
I did like that her mind ran to, this is a pretext for invasion by one of the multitude of hostile alien forces that have invaded the ship in the past. Therefore, I have armed myself with a chair and am demanding we go to a weapons locker before we go to engineering.
Here's what I want.
I am not convinced that this is somehow just a power failure.
Here's what I want. I want Kim to try and be the little hard ass that he is in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no, everything's fine. They probably just set up a mobile command post in engineering, blah, blah, blah. And then I want her to mention species 8472, and I want to see a look of horror cross Kim's face, and he goes, yeah, we can swing by the weapons locker. The fact they never reflect on the face that he was about to be written off of the show with worm bukkake all over his eyes and nose and mouth. And he's just so chill about it now. Like, this dude's taking double dosage of Federation Prozac.
Meanwhile, apparently Celis throws hers out.
They don't give it to
I need my anxiety. It gives me an edge. Mm-hmm. And they also have a similar situation where we finally have Neelix meet up with Tuvok, and they spend the rest of the episode together. And essentially the arc there is that Tuvok is trying to help Neelix overcome his intense fear about the situation. Neelix sort of fails at that, but in the last piece of the episode, he overcomes his fear to specifically save Tuvok, and even like does like action one-liners, be like, I'll pick you up by your damn ears if I have to.
Here's the takeaways from this. Neelix says this is the most scared I've ever been. Neelix has been in some pretty scary situations before.
Yeah, Neelix has had his lungs stolen.
Well, that's the second part we're going to go into, but like, wasn't Neelix part, what was that called, Juggernaut, where they had to go on the Malon vessel and there was like the bio-waste mutant stalking them and killing people?
Yes, the one where they got B'Elanna very greased up and sweaty.
Yeah. I mean, minus a very sexy ending there. That seemed like that was a pretty scary time. The Borg incidents, those were scary. Like, Neelix has seen some shit. The guided meditation that Tuvok gives him, where he says, okay, focus on a light. Now inhale and feel your lungs filled with a light. And it's like, are you being intentionally shitty? You know, this fucking cat's only got
plural.
One. Unless they gave him future Krusty Kess's good lung. Again, I mean, what happened to that lung? You got two people on that ship that have one lung apiece. Future Kess, you got to use all the parts of the buffalo, man. Like, you can't just throw that fucking lung out. Someone had to get that lung.
I just really was looking for the subplot where Neelix's one lung from a mayfly species gives out like 5 or 6 years in. He just like
Fair enough.
croaks, just falls over. Like,
Or he
oh, I'm
gets like
dead now.
partial Q powers off of it. Like there's a phantom limb dealing as Kess hyper evolves. Like her old lung gives him like the occasional wish or telekinesis or something. And I also was happy to see our old friend Set Piece reemerge. They're trying to open doors, and
The bomb nook.
yeah, the good old time bomb glory hole.
The bomb nook is in fact used in its exact specification.
We haven't seen that since the Voyager conspiracy. And speaking of using all the parts of the buffalo, if you're gonna get these set designers to make a new hole in the wall, David Livingston's gonna jam that fucking camera in there and give us a nice. There's two.
He is the most economical of the Voyager filmmakers. Like, David Livingston is very much a house guy when it comes to Star Trek. He is not fancy. He is not trying to do wild shit.
He
is
does.
extremely.
He gets some real goofy trick shots. Like, even in this episode alone, you get two separate views where you're peeking at the cast members through technology. The first being Janeway, where the camera is jammed in the replicator, looking at her, and then Time Bomb Glory Hole.
I'm not saying you can't do innovative camera work. What I am saying is that he is the use all of the buffalo guy, right? Like,
yeah.
He's going to use the bomb nook, like it's going to be as economical as possible when it comes to making the episode.
Not everybody knows about the bomb nook, right? Like, you bring in a guest director, they're not going to know all the hidey holes. But David Livingston, he's there so much, he knows all the glory holes to use.
he's an expert on all of the glory holes. Is that what you're saying about director David Livingston?
Director David Livingston was Livingston the one that was dating Janeway?
Kate Mulgrew.
Yeah.
No, that was. God, I have to look it up. It was.
Rick Colby.
Colby, yes.
Rick Colby might have had his dick in that time bomb glory hole for some set play.
We are going to a down a dark road. Let us continue talking about this episode.
Real quick, some more Delta Flyers fun there. They talk about the Universal lot had a problem with cats. Did you hear any of these?
No. And
that they would have this huge problem where these cats would come out of all the storage areas when the scenes were out, so the fucking sets would just be covered in cat hair, and they'd have to have like production assistants go through with lint brushes and just decat all of the expensive sets. And that some of the sets, not the bridge sets, I think it was the Planet Hell sets, would just stink like cat piss so fucking bad.
Jesus. God, that is, man, can't control your fucking stray cat problem enough to spare Planet Hell. I guess it does get you into the mood, though, right? Like, you're in a stinky sulfuric cave on a planet, having it smell like
aliens
cat piss.
World smell like cat piss.
I buy it. That's a value add. That's some method shit right there. That's what that is.
So yeah, they hang out, and by the end, Neelix, the tables turn, and it's Neelix dragging Tuvok. Who else gets shot in the face with electricity? Is it Tuvok?
Yeah, Tuvok there at the end gets got. That's why Neelix needs to save him.
So much good face shocking in this episode.
The episode ends up centering on the ship's falling apart. There's this kind of horror movie stuff going on. Like I said, like, Neelix has a whole thing when he's in the dark of the mess hall, and the music starts to get very horror movie-y. They try to set that mood. Some scenes are far more effective at it than others, but it concludes with the ship starting to try and communicate with Janeway, is what she puts together. Like, the computer is talking to her, and they had at this point put together that whatever was happening to the ship was being caused by some kind of phenomenon that seemed almost intelligent, right? Like, so there was that information, and then this information that led Janeway to believe, oh, this is a life form and it's trying to talk to us. And so she feeds it information on how to talk to them and eventually discovers indeed it is a life form. It was in that nebula that they were just in. It wants to go home. At first, it's trying to turn the ship around and make it go back. They return to the nebula only to find out that, oops, Janeway has burned its house down and it's gone. And now it's super pissed and has decided it is going to murder everyone on the ship and take their home away because its home has been destroyed. Which, okay, I like it. I like that as the space dilemma. You fucked up this thing's house and now it's mad at you.
That's
That
repercussion.
tracks, man. I
That
get
Voyager.
it. Like,
listen, that's why that next door rating's so low. All right.
yeah, even formless entities in nebulas have learned to hate you. Going all the way back to season 1 when you had to show it your belly to the thing in the nebula so that you could piss yourself and escape. Like, you've got a bad rep with every form of life in this whole goddamn quadrant.
Janeway makes everybody abandon ship. We find out later on that it took almost 3 days to get everybody back on board, which seems excessive, but good to know anyways. I want to point out little girl Borg. I like her. I like her. I like E25. I like their interplays. The two twin boys are kind of throwaway, but Imzadi, you said it Imzadi or Itzadi?
Mizadi.
Mizadi and E25, pretty good. I like these guys. I like Neelix in there, trying to distract him from the story with like Slim Jims and that fucking Flotter novel. I'm surprised he didn't have that damn stuffed animal they kept trying to make a thing.
I appreciated the callback to the Flotter like series of books.
Mm-hmm.
This was a good episode for continuity in a lot of ways. It was good for bringing back Tal Celis. It was good for just the technical explanation of what happened.
Vorik gets a shout out.
Vorik's name is mentioned. Like, you can tell, like, you can always tell when Brian Fuller is on a story because he just kind of like makes sure all this shit happens. Like,
and there's no reason not to. I mean, you've got so many opportunities to be self-referential. Take advantage of it. It's appreciated. Just fucking do it. I'm surprised that during the final exchange where Janeway's like, hey, work with me or neither of us are going to survive, like, it was very off-brand for her not to try and invoke a self-destruct.
I kind of got it, though, which is, okay, I'm going to save the crew because the ship will just destroy itself no matter what. It's a matter of me making the last ditch effort to try and save the ship. I've saved all the people. They're safe. Now it's either the ship's going to blow up because this entity's going to cause it to blow up because of its interference, or I'm going to fucking talk it into reason.
Maybe it'll blow up. Maybe it'll just break down and be dead in the water, and you've got the best Federation technology waiting to be salvaged by God knows who. For all the times Janeway's called a self-destruct, I'd say this is a real situation that would have begged merit of that. Finally, though, they reach an agreement. Janeway says, we'll go back. We'll find something new for you. And we are led to then assume that this entity had somehow been quarantined to Deck 12, Section 10 or whatever, and has been essentially cargo for the last several episodes. It would have been cool at some point, like, had it taken an episode or so to dump this thing off for some other dilemma to come across Voyager and this thing to like lightning over to their ship, fuck their shit up, and then come back to Voyager having freshly ravaged an enemy crew.
I kind of like the idea that there was a hidden adventure and that the solution was that this thing has just been chilling while they've been dealing with other bullshit, trying to find some place to put it.
Let me jump back.
And then there's
what has happened since then? Lifeline, not a big deal.
I mean, everything that happened after they met the Borg children, right? Like, we can say that for certain.
This thing could have fucked Kess up. That would have been lulzy, right? Muse, not a big opportunity there.
So Child's Play was when that was Hey It's Crowley. Collective was the episode when the kids came on board, which was the episode 16th episode. So Spirit Folk could have fucked up the Irish. Could have fucked up the Irish real good.
I'm done fucking with these holodeck things. Get Shocky in there. Or Shocky just say, I'm done with these guys, and Shocky could have went and dealt with them himself.
You had Harry's Canadian girlfriend showed up.
Ashes to ashes.
Shocky could have fucked those guys up. Shocky could have fucked up the Borg in Child's Play, right? That tactical cube or whatever sphere. You're gonna be like, Shocky, get him, buddy. They could have turned him into the ship's pet.
I like the idea of Shocky just being this malicious, marauding, bad motherfucker that they try their best to like get to chill, but when like pack leads and other space trash just gets to be too annoying, this thing just shocks over there and just rampages. And it's just another. It's like, again, to the Next Door analogy. Now Voyager has a fucking aggressive dog breed that's just off leash mauling kids all over the place.
It's why they gotta like hurry. Like, we gotta find a place to put this thing. Listen, a taste for blood.
These goddamn Voyager. Not only do they have a pet Borg, they've got a rogue Shocky, and it shocked my face so bad it stinks of dead skin now.
Oh, Jesus.
God, they could have done so much more with Shocky. I'm very sad.
I do like
pulled the Malorn back out. It could have shocked them up.
The briefing that would have to happen when they get back to Starfleet, right? And they go through all their adventures. Oh yeah, for 6 months we had a malefic energy entity that we had in our beck and call to ravage our enemies.
It was subletting Deck 12 until we could find a more appropriate. And then Admiral Hayes is like, "This is not Starfleet. I don't." And then all of a sudden, console explodes and his face gets shocked.
We sent him through the data stream.
Dr. Zimmerman gets shocked.
Or it's like he asks for an update, and they start getting this information. You just see like a video from Admiral Hayes. He's ashen. He's like, "Stop giving me updates. The less I know, the things I know now, I can be court-martialed for what you've done.
Yeah,
just destroy the records.
Go back." What? Damn, is there any chance we could have had Virtuoso? Shocky could have been a Virtuoso and shocked the assholes?
No, unfortunately, Virtuoso happened before Collect. I guess technically it was close enough that if
it could have made a detour back.
You know, it could be that this happened, before they got to the planet of the assholes, and they could have unleashed Shocky on them.
Is there ever like a sequel to The Haunting of Deck 12 where it's like Shocky 2 First Blood? Like Rambo naming? Was First Blood was the second Rambo.
I think Rambo 2 was just Rambo 2, and Rambo First Blood was
Rambo 3.
That was definitely the first one.
Listen, dude. Okay, fine. Shocky 2 Electric Boogaloo. It's the
Listen, horror movies do have a tendency to have a lot of bad sequels, right? And a lot of bad sequels that eventually require itinerations on the name. Friday the 13th got to like part 9, Jason Goes to Hell or whatever. Like,
when you've got Shocky living on the ship as a roommate, like, how stank do Tuvok and Paris have to be that this fucking thing?
This thing melted their flesh, gave them brain injuries.
And then, like, Janeway's just letting it chill out over there. Like, there could be some real good shade on that. Here's what I want out of this episode. Throw Shocky plot in the trash. I like the idea of when sci-fi and the supernatural begin to blur. And we've talked about this heavily in our first couple seasons of like, can there be magic? Can there be monsters in a warp capable society? Or do vampires and mummies just become different alien species and classified as whatever, right? You don't really, I would say the answer is no. You can't have that supernatural element. But this, like, I would have liked to see something Fucky in a nebula that they were traveling through that somehow is tachyons or whatever you want to call, but moments of intense violence or intense emotion remanifest like echoes coming back. And having scenes similar to in the Watchmen movie, where Dr. Manhattan is slowly putting himself back together, and you just have these ghostly images, half dead, slamming against bulkheads as these consciousnesses are like
Yeah,
rematerialized. Like some
and
real.
that gives you a really good horror vibe too. Like that's really just right? Like it just
Mhm.
kind of gives you the visceral kind of that's uncomfortable, which is I think kind of where a show like Voyager has to live when it's trying to hone in on that energy. It can't be scary. It's never going to be scary, but it can be horrifying.
And they've done horror well. The Caretaker, was it Cold Fire?
Yeah, that was good.
I mean, there was some great horror in that. Now that was the one where they cooked Tuvok's brain, but also like the crew members being pinned to the ceiling and blood dripping down. Like there was some pretty intense stuff there. There's been a lot of violence on Voyager, and I think you would have been a good way to like relive some of the traumatic experiences a ship's gone through if you really wanted to have that scary thing. And I like the idea of it just not a consciousness, not an alien stowaway, not real ghosts, but just powerful emotional events remanifesting, and the crew kind of having to have this moment where they look back at all the bad stuff that's happened and reflect.
As it is though, Shocky he does okay. The story they presented was not like at a level of like Fury where it demands rewrites. This was close. It just needed a little bit of fine tuning, maybe a better director that could have explored the horror of the situation they were in with these unexplained phenomenons happening, that this was all because of their own actions, that they were just a little too by the numbers, which is where I really do fault the director specifically to really deliver. But it's not that bad. Like if you've heard that this episode is dog shit, I assure you there is far, far, far worse just in this season, and certainly through all of Voyager, than this. This was perfectly acceptable, in my opinion.
I agree.
Speaking of perfectly acceptable, what are we watching next week?
We are moving into season 6, episode 26, season finale, Unimatrix Zero, Part 1. And there is 7 to 9, looking a little apprehensive. Janeway sees an opportunity to disrupt the Borg when 7 of 9 visits a virtual world where drones retain their individuality for a short time.
This episode, obviously, it continues on at the beginning of season 7, has like one of the coolest storylines as far as like furthering the idea of the Borg and telling a story about the collective that I think they ever came up with. And so I think it is beloved for that reason. It also has some of the more baffling Voyager as now OP against the Borg moments.
That's
that
impressive to hear because Voyager has been better than the Borg, I would say, for at least 2 seasons now.
it gets a little ridiculous on this particular
A little
front.
ridiculous. More
It does.
ridiculous than Tom Paris holding the collective up at gunpoint, the same way he held the Continuum up at gunpoint.
It's hard to forget the sins of Dark Frontier, but I think you can actually forgive a lot more of them in this episode, because unlike Dark Frontier, the rest of the episode's actually a banger. There's some real cool shit that goes down between this and then its follow up
Part of me,
that is cool to watch, and from a Trek fan's perspective.
the rational part of me is stank that the Borg are even still a thing. I think that First Contact was a great way to close the Borg out, and I'm resentful that the Borg as a unified collective are even still a thing. Like I could have gone with some rove pockets of marauding cubes, similar to what Lore did with his Borg mercenaries in wasn't Unification, was it? No, it was
No.
whatever the fuck that was. The other hand, they've been able to tell some interesting Borg stories here and there in Voyager with these non-traditional storylines, such as Chakotay's co-op. No, not co-op. What was it? Was it the co-op? Was that the name of the Borg renegade?
The Borg cooperative.
Co-optase co-op. Yeah.
Yes.
I like the survival instinct. The quartet coming back together and the damage. So I'm excited to hear that you're saying this isn't going to be a complete turd, because certainly there's been some real bad Borg ones.
Yeah, there have, which is why I kind of wanted to front load this by saying this has got some redeeming qualities to it at a minimum. The overall quality of it, certainly worthy of discussion between the two of us, but this is got some really interesting stuff that they choose to lay down as far as the Borg goes, and also like directions they could have gone after this with the Borg that were interesting. Obviously, like Bermanera Trek kind of died in terms of its timeline after Voyager in a way that prevented that. Anyway, we'll talk more about it starting next week when we review.
I'm sad to know
Zero.
That Shocky's not going to be there to take his turn fucking up the collector. That's how you make Voyager really OP against the Borg, and me be perfectly chill with it. Like Shocky paying his rent, tearing up another queen.